this could be the beginning of the end of the USMCA, which, remember, dates back to the 90s. It was actually the renegotiated version of the NAFTA pact that Trump himself signed in 2020. Today, he opened the door to breaking that up into two separate pacts. And I think that's going to be a big point of negotiation going forward.
Now, President Trump's been meeting the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney at the White House. It was a chance for both leaders to try to thaw the frosty relationship between their two neighbouring countries. This is Mark Carney's less than subtle attempt at doing just that.
You kindly hosted me and some of my colleagues a few months ago, and I said at the time, you are a transformative president. And since then, the transformation in the economy, unprecedented commitments of NATO partners to defense spending, peace from India, Pakistan through to Azerbaijan, Armenia, disabling Iran as a force of terror, and now, and I'm running out of time, but this is many respects the most important.
The merger of Canada and the United States.
That wasn't where I was going.
Well, that was Mark Carney and President Trump, all very different from the battles of the past. Let's talk to Gavin Bade, who's a trade reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Good evening to you, Gavin.
Hi, how are you? Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you with us. Mark Carney, during his battle to get elected, was making this big point of standing up to President Trump. I mean, he was really lavishing it on today, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a number of world leaders have learned from President Zelensky's first foray in the Oval Office is perhaps a misadventure, and learned that, buttering Trump up is a better strategy than trying to stand up to him there. And I think you saw Mark Carney has gone through this evolution as well. Early in his term, he was a little bit more adversarial with Trump and threatened to put a digital services tax, for instance, in place. He's since learned that maybe it's a little bit easier to go along and get along, especially if you, like he, wants a trade deal with the United States. And I think that that's kind of what he was aiming at doing today.
So what is the state of the trade arrangements between the US and Canada at the moment? Because there are some pretty steep US tariffs on a lot of Canadian goods, aren't there?
Yes, we have the 25% fentanyl tariffs in place, 10% for some goods like energy, but there's a large exemption. There's a big carve out for goods that are compliant with the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. And that is really where the rubber hits the road here. That agreement comes up for a mandatory review next year. And the Trump administration has already started soliciting comments from US industry and labor unions about how they should approach that. That was actually, for me, the biggest news of the day, is that President Trump was asked about this review, and he said he kind of opened the door to splitting the pact up, so to speak, doing a separate pact with Canada and a separate pact with Mexico. This could be the beginning of the end of the USMCA, which, remember, dates back to the 90s. It was actually the renegotiated version of the NAFTA pact that Trump himself signed in 2020. Today, he opened the door to breaking that up into two separate pacts, and I think that's going to be a big point of negotiation going forward.
So at the moment, Canada is still imposing significant tariffs on US goods in retaliation to the tariffs the other way around. Presumably the idea of a trade deal was that a lot of those tariffs would be swept away or at least reduced dramatically.
Yes, well, I think that the tariffs are largely on goods that do not comply, and it's a relatively small amount of trade that between the U.S. and Canada that doesn't comply with what's called the USMCA. So going forward, the focus is going to be, can they renew that pact as a three-country pact with the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, or is Trump going to split it up and try to do bilateral deals with each, try to play them off each other, so to speak? I think that's what he's opened the door to today. His advisors have been talking about that, and I think that would be a sea change for the economics of the North American continent. It would be a really, really fundamental change in how we do things over here.
But that presumably would take quite some time to negotiate.
Certainly, but we've seen Trump, you really try to speed run these negotiations over the past year, and the whole pact legally has to come up for a review or a renegotiation in 2026 anyway. So everyone knew this was going to happen. It was just a question of whether Trump would try to hew to the structure of the pact that, again, he himself signed in 2020 and he renegotiated, or is he going to try to blow the whole thing up and start from scratch? It seems like he may be leaning in that direction from his comments today and comments of some of his advisors recently. And I think we could see that be one of the biggest trade stories of next year, no matter how long it eventually takes to do both of those deals.
And the key to all of this, as we were saying at the beginning, seems to be the greatly improved personal relationship between Mark Carney and Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Canada had other asks here as well. There's still some unresolved business when it comes to the steel and aluminum tariffs. Canada, especially facing some steep tariffs on aluminum, sends a lot of aluminum down to the United States, and so they wanted to see those tariffs. They wanted to see those tariffs come down. Now, we did not see a deal to do that today. They released a statement saying that the two sides are going to, redouble their efforts and have the senior advisors really try to come to a steel and aluminum deal here. Count me as skeptical. I'm not sure what that means that they were doing before, but we thought they were negotiating over this for some time now. They did not come to an agreement today.
Gavin Bade, trade reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Prime Minister, will you accept President Trump's offer for free coverage of the Golden Dome?
We're going to be talking about trade. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things.
For you to drop or lower your tariffs on Canadian sectors, including aluminum and steel.
Well, we're going to be talking about that with the Prime Minister. We'll be talking about tariffs. We'll be talking about a lot of that, but that's for a little bit later on.
Why has Canada and the United States failed to reach an agreement up until now?
Well, it's a complicated agreement, more complicated maybe than any other agreement we have on trade, because, we have natural conflict. We also have mutual love. We have great love for each other. I love this. I love Canada and the people of Canada, and Mark feels the same way about here. The problem we have is that they want a car company and I want a car company, meaning the U.S. wants a car company, and they want steel and we want steel. And, so in other countries, they're very far away, and there's no problem. You can compete and you can do. We don't like to compete because we sort of hurt each other when we compete, and so we have a natural conflict. It's a natural business conflict. Nothing wrong with it, and I think we've come a long way over the last few months, actually, in terms of that relationship. So when it comes to trade, the United States was always giving everything. They gave everything to Canada. They would let car companies leave here and go to Canada. But that hurts the United States. And, other presidents didn't see that. They weren't business-oriented. They might have been good politicians in some cases, not in all cases. They were bad at both. But it's a very natural conflict, and it's something that we're working out.
Are you willing today to offer some compromise to Canada, maybe on steel and aluminum?
We've made compromise, and we've made some compromise even on steel. But, we have the same basic authority and the same basic, this could be also a little bit of a conflict with other countries all over the world on steel, because we want to make our own steel. We don't want to bring steel in for the most part, but we will bring it in, and we do bring it in. We continue to bring it in from Canada, but there is a tariff to pay.
What do you say to Canadians that don't want to go to the U.S. now because of your 51st state talk, because of the trade war, the tariffs?
Yeah. Look, I understand that, and Americans don't want to buy cars that are made in Canada. We have the same conflict. So there isn't. It's something that will get worked out. There's still great love between the two countries, but American people want product here. They want to make it here. A couple of months ago, we have over $17 trillion being invested now in the United States. As an example, again, we want Canada to do great, but there's a point at which we also want the same business. We're competing for the same business. That's the problem. That's why I keep mentioning one way to solve that problem is a very easy way. But we're competing for the same business. He wants to make cars, we want to make cars, and we're in competition. And the advantage we have is we have this massive market. So it's it's quite an advantage.
Will Canada be leaving empty-handed, or will will Mr. Carney be leaving Washington with a deal on tariffs?
I think they're going to be very happy. We have a lot of things that we're working on that people don't talk about. They talk about, competitiveness. He's a very competitive person. And they talk about things that we don't necessarily agree on. But I think they're going to walk away very happy. I think so.
Mr. President, what is Canada giving you in return? If you say Mr. Carney is going to be leaving Washington happy, what's Canada giving you in return?
Well, you'll find out. But I think the people of Canada, they will love us again. Most of them still do. If you say only 25%, I assume a lot of them. I think they love us.
President, will you sign a trade deal with Canada that doesn't include supply managed goods like dairy, for example?
Well, a deal would include dairy. I mean, it's going to include everything. We'll do a comprehensive. Well, it's a complicated agreement, more complicated maybe than any other agreement we have on trade because, we have natural conflict. We also have mutual love. We have great love for each other. I love this. I love Canada and the people of Canada. And Mark feels the same way about here. It's a tough situation because we want to make our cars here. At the same time, we want Canada to do well making cars. So we're working on formulas, and I think we'll get there.